it started with Ted Kennedy.
Yeah.
It started with Ted Kennedy. This is a memorial to Ted Kennedy.
He do away around it. He just don't want. He wants to go around that.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, if it's repealed, if we have the majority and it's just simply repealed, does it just everything just go away? Because there's a lot of aspects to it.
Are you talking about if Congress repealed it?
Yes.
And it depends on what let's say the Supreme Court hears the case and they declare it to be constitutional, the individual mandate and the bill. But then Congress decides to repeal it. The law is gone. But the problem is you then have a precedent where the court has said that it's okay for Congress to do what they just did. So 2 years later, Congress changes. It goes back to the Democrats. They can just pass it again, and then we're just back to where we started. And the Supreme Court says it's constitutional. So one of the problems, and this is why it's so important that the Supreme Court do the right thing here, because even if Congress repeals it, it may not. It's going to help. It's going to matter, but we'd always have to worry that Congress is going to bring back some type of mandate at some point, unless there's a constitutional amendment that would address it. Sorry.
But if it's repealed, then everything just goes away, because I know there's a lot of different aspects to it. Does it just simply disappear, or is it going to take time to sort through all of the different aspects and get rid of it?
It depends on what Congress wanted to do. If they wanted to phase out the bill over time, they could. I think I don't know why a repeal couldn't just happen. I don't know what would be the problem with it. As it is, especially if it is 2012, there's already issues in terms of just trying for states to try to comply with the law and businesses just trying to change things up to comply. So to repeal it, I don't think it's going to be like businesses are going to be upset or states are going to be that upset in the sense of, oh my gosh, we've invested so much now.
Oh, I didn't.
I'm saying that. So I think a repeal could just be it. That's it. No more. We don't have to worry about it. Goodbye. But practically, politically, it just becomes a question of how well the Republicans would do in the next election, and I don't know how they'll do. A lot. Well, nobody does, but a lot can change between now and November 2012, and certainly a lot's going to. This case is going to have, if it's heard by the Supreme Court, which I think it will, regardless of how it turns out, is going to. I tell you what, let's say it's found constitutional. A lot of Republicans are going to be voting in November 2012. That's going to get a lot of people out to vote. So now, if it's found unconstitutional, it doesn't mean a lot of Republicans aren't going to go out and vote, but let's hope it's found unconstitutional, because we don't want the court to say ever that Congress has this kind of power.
Can they refuse to hear?
Can the Supreme Court? Yeah. In fact, we don't know that they're going to hear it. We don't know.
We'd be better off if they did.
Well, that's what I'm arguing. It might be possible that they'd be better off. And it could be better off if they don't hear it and just wait until you get a Republican Congress. And now the court's not going to work that way. But it could be. That's the risk, because I think there's no question it's going to be a close call. It could go either way. So maybe it is better off that you wait till the Congress repeals the bill, and you hope that over time that maybe some of the makeup of the court changes, and so if it's ever brought up again, you have a more favorable makeup of the court. So there are some risks involved.
It's not a foregone conclusion they're going to hear it.
Sorry, what was that?
It's not a foregone conclusion that they're going to hear it.
It's not on the docket yet.
When the DOJ didn't appeal it, I thought it automatically went.
No, it's not automatic, and they're almost certainly going to hear it this term. If they don't hear it this term, it would be very surprising. And while they're never required to hear a case, they would eventually hear the case. if they didn't hear it this term, it would be next term. So while they don't have to, they would hear it. Yeah.
Did you hear a couple weeks ago, this was on Limbaugh, he was talking about Justice Clarence Thomas. I don't know if you've looked into this, but apparently he's been doing a lot of work with his wife and some of his, some of his assistants, looking at the Commerce Clause, and he has done so much work on this so thoroughly that, according to what I heard, he's going to be able to roll back legislation that has been abused in this area regarding the Commerce Clause back 70 years. Now, of course, he's coming under heavy fire, and he's about to when he unveils this in the hearings. But have you heard anything about that?
No, for some reason I think I've seen something about that, but I don't know what you mean by he'd unveil something in the hearings, though.
Well, I think he's working on it'll be like a special secret weapon, for lack of a better term, that will show up when this goes to the Supreme Court, that he'll be able to bring up, and it sounds like it's pretty strong.
So what I'm gathering is he's done a lot of legal research at the Commerce Clause and found some arguments that he thinks he can use to try to not only strike down this law, but also to try to go further.
Back 70 years.
One of the problems, I don't have a problem with that, that'd be great. But Justice Roberts and Alito, certainly Justice Roberts, have had a philosophy, he's had a philosophy of trying to issue opinions that are more narrow in scope and not trying to be too expansive, but to focus just on that particular issue. Mm-hmm. So while Justice Thomas may have some great arguments, it doesn't mean that the other justices would necessarily want to go as far as Justice Thomas would. Even justices that would strike down the individual mandate. So I think that it would be pretty difficult. In fact, I show you this 2005 case, Gonzalez versus Raich, with dealing with medicinal marijuana. That was a perfect opportunity for the Supreme Court to strike down the Wickard case, dealing with the farmer. They didn't do it out of respect for past precedent, and they basically upheld that case and issued the medicinal marijuana case. And that a lot of the same cast of characters. So it might be possible that Thomas can make some good arguments and get a justice or two along with him. But overall, I would be surprised if they were able to use this case to roll back a lot of Commerce Clause jurisprudence. I'd be surprised.
It'd be hard for me to believe that he would put that much time into something that would be that easy to shoot down from even some of the more conservative, more originalist judges. I mean, and of course the devil's in the details, but I'll send that to you because I would love to get your take on that, because I should have reviewed that before I came here, but I wanted to know if you heard anything about it.
Doesn't say anything in there about his wife, and as far as she goes, she's got a bunch of lawsuits against her right now for that type of thing, which is part of the. Let me ask a question, which is a little off of everybody. Do you think that since the Obamacare has been voted into law, that it has had any influence on the cost of healthcare cost over the last 2 years? Let's face it, conservatives claim, the cost is driven up constantly, okay? Actually, mine went up 40%, but we won't get into that. But that's through an insurance company, okay? My supplemental insurance. What effect has that had as far as the Obamacare? What portion has been implemented? Of course, a lot of it hasn't until 13 and 14. But they say that's because that's what's driving up the cost. Does people feel that this what's happening?
Yeah, I don't have data on me to prove that, so take it for what it's worth. But personal experience I'm just talking to people and insurance companies dropping, getting out of certain businesses, and there's less competition and things driven up in prices because businesses trying to figure out what they're going to do as a result of having to comply with this law. So yeah, it's driving up costs. It certainly has.
Should be good for the insurance companies, they're gonna pay it, right? I mean, they're gonna get the policies, what are you talking about? They're gonna get it,
Yeah,
right?
well,
For now, they're trying to get what?
Well,
So, yeah, I think there's
insurance
been-
companies are gonna want to sell the insurance policies, right?
I think it's had an impact, but I can't show you data to prove that.
We know that small businesses are terrified of it.
Yeah, and look, when you're doing business, one of the things you want is predictability. And something Obama may not take in a business class, but one of the most important things for businesses is predictability. You want to know, you want a stable business climate. You want to know, you don't want things to be up in flux all the time because you can't plan, you can't invest, you don't know what's going on. Well, that's what's going on with Obamacare. And small businesses, like you said, are scared of this. A lot of businesses are scared of this. So the economy is not doing well. There's a lot of reasons why it's not doing well, but one reason is you get a very volatile business climate. Businesses can't do the planning, and they don't have predictability. So that's why it wasn't probably such a good idea maybe to pass Obamacare. At a time when the economy was doing bad, which it was, when Obama took office. So, I mean, not that there was ever a good time for Obamacare, but it certainly wasn't a good time.
You said that about Social Security too, right, and Medicare. That's been going around all the time too, hasn't it?
It has. Anything else?
Just ask about Helena Kagan, is there, what is the chance, do you think, of her recusing herself, or is there, is that the only way for her not to participate in this is that she makes that call, that there's no other pressures or anything to be put?
I don't know if she has enough of a conflict. Is there a conflict that I think I've heard some weak, I think I've heard some weaker arguments,
She heard some
maybe.
cases.
No, she was in on the
She
discussion of
supposedly
this.
worked on it, and I don't mean the actual bill itself, but she had worked on some things that were similar to that.
I think I would have to look more into that. That's something, but whether or not that's enough for her to recuse herself, I don't know. I haven't really heard a lot of discussion about her having to recuse herself. I've heard some mention of it. I'd be surprised if she had
I
recused
would
herself.
too, but I'm saying.
And with that change, it would certainly make a big difference if she did.
Oh, yes.
But I don't think that, especially if you're just doing prep work at the DOJ on a particular issue. I don't know. Maybe it's enough. It's questionable.
Maybe they'll swap off with her and Scalia. Would that work that way? How many people in here know exactly what the Supreme Court is made up of? What their structure is as far as, do you know? Do you know what it is as far as, what their religious structure is, what
Yeah.
their affiliation is?
There are no Protestants. There are no Protestants on it.
What is that?
There are no Protestants on it.
Yeah, it's made up of 3 Jews and 6 Catholics. But not a lot of people really know that. What's the Supreme
Yeah,
Court
right.
made up of?
Ginsburg, Kagan.
And it really want to frighten you with something like this. It's to frighten people. If Obama does win, there will be another woman. It will be a first Protestant. You want to know who that's going to be?
Hillary.
That's right on.
That'd be a reason why. Look, the reason why it's so important to vote for a president you actually want to see in office is because the ability to appoint Supreme Court justices. Because we're seeing how important the Supreme Court is. Of course, the particular party, Republican Party, or whatever party it may be, has to have candidates that people want to vote for. Got to get people excited. You can't always, this is me, my political talk, which I don't really know much. You can't just rely on people's discuss with the other candidate. You can't get the base excited because they don't like Obama. That's been done, and we've seen this I've seen that a lot recently. You need to have a candidate that at least the base likes. Not somebody like, all right, let's just get somebody that could probably win. You need somebody you somewhat like. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
They said the president's only as strong as the Congress, but he goes around Congress and says, well, we don't even need him.
I could do a whole, and that's one of the whole executive. I'm very interested in what's called administrative law and executive power. And you know what happens is Congress will pass a law, and it's like the Clean Air Act, for example, and they'll say that they'll delegate excessive amount of power to the Environmental Protection Agency. So they'll say, EPA, you get to regulate pollutants, and they'll just define it as something really broad. And then what it does is it gives the EPA all kinds of power as to decide what a pollutant is, and gives them all kinds of power as to what they can do to make sure that there is no pollution. And so what the Congress is doing is they're delegating away all the legislative power to the agencies. So you get these unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats that are developing public policy that affect all of us. Unfortunately, there used to be a provision, a principle called the non-delegation doctrine, where Congress was not allowed to delegate away its legislative power. I mean, technically it still exists, but it used to be a lot stricter than it is. In other words, Congress, if you're going to delegate, you just cannot give too much power to the agencies. You have to have. And unfortunately, what's happened is the administrative state has gotten bigger. The courts have basically said to Congress, well, yeah, you can delegate away a lot of these powers as long as you have some type of guidelines for the administrative agencies. Which basically means administrative agencies like the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, can do so much, and you can have, and all of you have so little input as to what they're doing. The only way to have any say really is to hope that Congress holds them accountable, or the president, a new president, one president voted out, new president's voted in, it can affect what they're doing. You probably heard, Congress trying to, they complain about what the EPA is doing. Well, the thing that's very important to remember is the reason why EPA is out of hand and is out of control is because of Congress.
Yeah.
It's not, EPA, of course, are going to be out of control. There are a bunch of bureaucrats that want power and are going to continue to want power. They're going to do whatever they want until you stop them. If you give them that power, of course, they're going to want more power. So Congress has to be the one that limits the power of these agencies. So we need to hold Congress accountable when these agencies are out of hand. We need to hold the agencies accountable too, but it's kind of hard. You got to hold Congress accountable.
We need a reverse gear or neutral. Get them out of drive.
We definitely, and there are some interesting bills out there. We try to restrict. Look, Congress is always going to delegate too much power. That's just the way it passed. But there are some bills out there that are kind of interesting in terms of being able to restrict what agencies can do. So that if they create like a rule that would be too costly, Congress would have some ability to, in a way, veto the regulation. Technically, it's not a veto. And there's some constitutional questions about the bill. It's called the REINS Act, if you're interested in this issue. And there's a couple other regulatory bills too. But it's an interesting issue, because what you want is, knowing that Congress just can't help itself but to pass off power, you do want some type of mechanism so that if the agency is going out of hand, that there's a way for this Congress after the fact to limit what the agencies can do. And by the way, why does Congress delegate so much power? Really, it's not just because of the expertise, but why do you think Congress delegates so much power?
Lobbying.
Well, that.
And so people like them.
That's right.
Yeah.
So they don't have to make the hard decisions. So they can pass it off to bureaucrats, and they can just say, "Hey, blame EPA, not us."
That's the whole problem with them, because when you look at, and most people don't think about this, but there are three equal branches of government. But the Congress is like down here, you've got the president's got all this power in the Supreme Court. Everybody thinks it's got the most power, but they're three equal branches. One doesn't have any more than the other. But
The Congress, you know, has got the ability, Congress should be
they
the
got
most
purse
powerful.
strings.
Well, Congress really should have the most power. And as I would say is they do, actually, in a way.
But you gotta have both houses.
But the thing is, look, the fact that they delegated away their power, or they're not doing what they need to do to hold the agencies accountable, that's their fault. So again, I would,
But if they
Yeah.
don't try, I mean, they just sit there and do nothing. Well, they try, they might get enough votes.
because they can blame the EPA. They can
Do
blame
away
the
with the
agencies.
EPA. You had to pick two regulations that you wanted to change, you know, would have totally wiped it right out. What would that be?
Wow. Boy, the ones that I know of, one thing I would want to do is, I'm not saying I would want to wipe out the Clean Air Act, but I would,
What?
the Clean Air Act, I would certainly want to have better definitions within the statute. So certainly the Clean Air Act needs to be amended, changed, and defined so that CO2 is not a pollutant, and pollutant is defined a lot better, that the EPA is not simply, the EPA is required to consider the economic impact of imposing certain environmental regulations.
Say it's
So-
not a pollutant, is that what you say?
Right, CO2, carbon dioxide, it's not
It's not
a
a
pollutant.
pollutant.
And, because it's not, maybe according to the Supreme Court. And, I mean, that would be one. There are, gosh, there's some costly ones. Well, Obamacare. I mean, there's certainly regulation involved and mandate. So that'd be a good one. I mean, there's others. There's laws dealing with financial services.
If we wanted to go ahead and work with